To me, part of The Road is about that thin line between civilization and chaos, the veneer between we're all in this together and every man and family for themselves.
I'm Gilbert Cruz, and this is the book review from the New York Times. The 100 best books of the 21st century. I've made reference many times on this show to that project, which we published in summer 2024. It was this massive effort where we reached out to more than 1,000 novelists and nonfiction writers, poets, bookstore owners, and all sorts of lovers of literature to ask what they thought were the best books of the century so far. We wanted to get an early read on what might be the great works from now that continue to resonate. We took all that data, number crunched, compiled it, and put together this list. But of course, even the most robust list of books can only tell you so much about each title. It's in talking about them. That's where the great fun lies. So today we're going to dig in on one of those books, number 13 on the list, The Road by Cormac McCarthy. McCarthy, who died in 2023, is the author behind books as popular and traditional as No Country for Old Men and All the Pretty Horses, and as ornate and naughty as Blood Meridian. Following the success of All the Pretty Horses, he largely stayed out of the literary spotlight, spending much of his time, particularly his later years, at the Santa Fe Institute, a think tank full of scientists, physicists, and mathematicians. His legacy was complicated after his death by revelations in a Vanity Fair article. The piece detailed how he'd started a sexual relationship with a teenage girl when he was in his 40s. There's now been debate about how much she may have influenced his writing. But for The Road, which won a Pulitzer in 2007, McCarthy has said he looked to his son for inspiration. It tells the story of a man and his young boy trying to survive in a cold, gray, ash-filled post-apocalyptic United States. The book, like others by McCarthy, mixes beautiful and ornate language with gruesome and unforgettable images. He doesn't use quotation marks. Don't even talk to him about semicolons. He is not a fan. It feels both minimalist and maximalist at the same time. It's an amazing book, and I wanted to talk about it with one of the people who put it on their ballot of the best books of the 21st century so far, Ryan Holiday. Ryan is the author of more than a dozen nonfiction books, many about the ancient philosophy of Stoicism. He is the host of the Daily Stoic podcast and owner of the Painted Porch Bookshop in Bastrop, Texas, just outside Austin. Ryan, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Ryan, you are one of the 500 people that helped make this list. In addition to knowing you as an author, like so many people know you from your book recommendations on Instagram and on YouTube, I want to take all that experience into account and ask you as we start, what have you found is the thing that makes people return to a good novel over and over again, which I think is different from what makes people return to a piece of nonfiction that's full of information?
I think what the great novels do is they grow with you. So what you take out of them the first time is different than what you take out of them the second and the third and the fourth time. And I suppose there's nonfiction that this can be true for. Usually, sort of so packed with advice that, you can't get it all in one. But I tend to find with novels, it's the richness of the writing and the characters and the complicated nature of them that you come to understand on a deeper level. You read the Odyssey, and on some level, it's about a guy getting home. Then you get older, and you go, oh, this is actually a guy who's less trying to get home, but is sort of condemned to always be moving and doing. And you see him perhaps more as a tragic figure. And so I think the great novels, they work on both like a superficial level, like it's entertaining and exciting and relatable the first time, but then as you read and reread and reread, you get something else. Gatsby is obviously a great example of this. On one level, it's a perfect snapshot of the jazz age. And then you realize on a different level, it's about the American dream. It's about ambition. It's about corruption. It's about materialism. It's about all these other themes. And perhaps you're not equipped to get all of them when you read them in high school. But as you get older, it reveals more and more of itself to you.
I think that's a useful way of putting it. I've experienced this, of course. A great book can grow with you as you grow and as you get older. If we're going to talk about The Road, I think it would be useful to quickly recap it here for anyone who hasn't had a chance to read it yet or hasn't read it in a while. So the book begins with a father and a son. We never learn their names. And they're trying to make their way across the U.S. in the wake of some kind of cataclysmic disaster. We never learn what exactly happened. Was it a meteor? Was it a nuclear bomb? They're pushing a shopping cart with everything that they own in it, and they're trying to get to the coast, a little bit down south where they think they're going to be safer or at least warmer. Along the way, they are near starvation several times. They're surviving on scraps, and they're having to hide out and keep watch because one of the biggest dangers on the road is other people. It is said many times in the book that some of their fellow survivors on Earth have turned to cannibalism, so they want to stay clear of those people. Overall, it's this story of a father, a dad really trying to do everything he can to keep his son alive while knowing deep down inside that it might not actually be enough. So I want to talk about how that story, again, very bleak, very apocalyptic, has grown with you, Ryan. I want to dig into the first time that you read it. You said that you picked it up as a college sophomore?
Mm-hmm.
And were you a big reader of fiction then? Like what?
I don't know. I don't think I was a big reader of fiction except for, the kinds of books that you would be assigned in school. I don't think I knew that there was books like this out there. I don't know if I knew about All the Pretty Horses or Blood Meridian yet, but I was much more a nonfiction reader at that point in my life.
Yeah. You're in college, you're figuring stuff out. You're imagining the whole world is ahead of you. Your whole life is ahead of you.
Yes.
And you pick up this book, which is like, actually, maybe not. Maybe the world can end at any point. How did you feel when you read this for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, it's dark and depressing and alarming. I think I was struck by the beauty of the writing, the sparseness of it. I do remember right around that time seeing the movie Children of Men, which was it's based on a novel as well, but another sort of similarly apocalyptic work. So that was probably coloring my experience. But I just remember thinking, wow, this is really cool. I should read this guy's other stuff. But being a sophomore in college or thereabouts, I don't have kids. I'm not married. I guess it's a testament to how good the book is that it can still be read and experienced even if you really can't even conceive of the central sort of relationship driving the book.
Sure. On that first read, were there moments that stood out to you that you remembered? I had not read this book since it came out in 2006, so it's celebrating its 20th anniversary. And I still remember the moment with the Coke, which happens 25 pages in. The father and son come by an old soda machine, and the father, he finds a Coca-Cola, and he gives it to his son, who has no idea what it is. He's never seen it. He's never tasted it. He says it's bubbly. It's sort of surprising to him. The man, of course, is very familiar with Coke, one of the great drinks in modern existence. And it's just a nice little moment, and that has stuck with me all these years.
The thing I took most out of the book was the image of carrying the fire. I took that as the central message of the book, that there is this kind of goodness, morality, earnestness that we have in us, an innateness that the job of both the parent and the person surviving in a fallen, broken, evil world is to keep that fire alive, to carry it. And I think that was what I was most struck by. And I remember a few years later, I bought or someone gave me a Zippo lighter that just said "carry the fire" on it. And it sits on my desk. And so I've always loved that. And you know what I think struck me about it, reading other Cormac McCarthy books later, is there's a level of hopefulness and positivity and goodness there that is not so much a theme in many of his other books, which are so dark and so scathing of sort of human nature and human society. There's something much sweeter about The Road than anything else he writes.
It's amazing to hear you use the word sweet in relation to this book for perhaps obvious reasons. It's a very dark book, but I think you're right, as we'll probably discuss. Where it ends up is, to my surprise, a place of hope at the end. I'm imagining you, a young man in college, thinking about the fire, thinking about goodness, morality, what it means to be a person. I'm trying to remember how I was at that age. It's just like, I'm just trying to get through. Maybe I'm being a little crazier than I would have been at home. I'm not thinking about being a person in the world in that way.
I guess I was. I mean, that's what I think drew me to literature and philosophy, especially at that time in my life, was that very genuine interest in meaning and purpose and morality. I think I was drawn to that in fiction and in nonfiction because, I don't know, I wanted my fix, which I do think the best art does is it gives us, not to put it too cornerly, like it helps us carry the fire. Like we see in these stories and statues and paintings and mosaics and myths, like something about that higher calling or higher capacity, and it inspires in us maybe fleeting examples of that in our own behavior.
It is a book in which, perhaps for obvious reasons, it's a post-apocalyptic world. Most people have died violently. God is absent, largely, but the man makes scant reference to it, at least in the idea that whatever the God is, there's something there that he talks to a couple of times in the book. But also, early on in the book, he looks at his child and he says, then he just sat there holding the binoculars and watching the ashen daylight congeal over the land. He knew only that the child was his warrant. He said, if he is not the word of God, God never spoke. And there is a sense of meaning, and that meaning is in this other person that he is responsible for.
Yeah, I marked that passage also. I
have my book right here,
man. I was very, very struck by that. Yeah, there is a purity and a holiness in a young child that I do think we're obligated to protect and shepherd into its existence. And that's kind of what I thought he meant by carrying the fire. Like, this is this thing that you've been given. Don't let it go out.
I was struck by that passage, but also by so many other passages. He writes like no one I've ever read. The
Yes.
sense of rhythm, the word choice, half of the words that I had never seen before, I was convinced he made up. And then I looked up the words. I was like, no, this is a real word. You just don't have Cormac McCarthy's vocabulary. There is a moment, if you mind me reading this, it's not particularly notable for what happens, but there's just the rhythm of his prose in this book is out of sight. The soft black talc blew through the streets like squid ink uncoiling along a seafloor, and the cold crept down and the dark came early, and the scavengers passing down the steep canyons with their torches trod silky holes in the drifted ash that closed behind them as silently as eyes. He is doing something with rhythm here and pacing and word choice and imagery that I remember as a person in their 20s when I read this the first time. Even then, I was like, this is elite. Like, I don't know how to get over this.
Yeah, I think there's two things. So one, I kind of have this pet theory that there are certain authors or books where everything they'd done up until that point was leading them to this sort of perfect moment. Like, I think Michael Lewis wrote a half dozen or a dozen sort of finance character-driven books, and then the great financial crisis happened, and he was the perfect person to explain that thing. Mm-hmm. And everything that Cormac McCarthy wrote and went through, and his weird worldview and whatever, all of his work, his thousands and thousands of hours, his craft as a writer is all leading up to that. Then the other thing I noticed is it has more of a Mad Max element that I think I missed on the first couple readings.
Sure, there is and he only speckles this throughout, but the appearances of this element are very notable. You know, he talks about sort of the blood cults and the marauders and all this stuff, and another author would have made that the central source of tension, but McCarthy doesn't do that. He makes this story about the core relationship between the man and his son. He didn't do many interviews, but he actually did a rare interview in 2007. When Oprah picked the book for her book club, he appeared on her show. And he told her that the inspiration for The Road came during a 2003 visit to El Paso. He went to El Paso with his young son, John. His son was asleep, and McCarthy looked out the hotel window and imagined what that town might look like in 50, 100 years. He says he imagined fires on a distant hill and he thought about his son and what it would be like for a son to live in that terrible world. He didn't write the book until years later, but clearly that was the moment. He dedicates The Road, not surprisingly, to his son. This is all relevant to the next time that you picked up The Road. Coming up, Ryan Holiday talks about returning to The Road years later after he had kids of his own and how it made for an entirely different reading experience. We'll be right back. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking, but I decided to reread The Road, not just after I had kids, but in the early days of the pandemic.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's funny because I couldn't bring myself to read Camus' The Plague, but I did decide to pick up The Road. And I remember zipping through it. I finished it. I just put my oldest son to bed. He would have been 3.5, maybe 4. And as I finished, my wife was still putting our baby down, and I'm just looking around at this empty house. It's dark. We live out in the country in Texas. And I was like, I can't be by myself. And I went into his room and I just broke down and wept because, The Road captures both the beauty and the horror of being a parent, that this incredible bond, it's been said like your kid is your heart running around outside your body. That was a difficult moment in time. Obviously, now we know how the story ends, but we didn't necessarily in those early days of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I think I felt all that very acutely. And it's interesting to me to hear that the book was somewhat inspired by a sleeping child. There is something about that too that is, if you're just always going as a parent, but when you slow down and you see them sleeping there at peace, it's impossible not to be moved by it.
What was it about that moment or that rereading that led you to this idea, I need to be near my child, or I cannot be alone at this particular moment?
I mean, I think it's just the very realness of the idea that the world is falling apart, that you have essentially no ability to protect or shield them from this thing that is happening. And one of the moving scenes in The Road is a flashback where his son is being born, and his wife is pregnant, and there's like thunderclouds, and he just senses that I think the power goes out, and it's the first sign that things are about to go wrong, mm-hmm. right? This sort of impending doom. That is kind of the feeling that I remember from some of those early days of the pandemic, the presidential address, the news, the everyday more reports, the case count. There was a possibility of it going the way that it went in this book. And so I think that's the feeling that I had there. The thin line, to me, part of The Road is about that thin line between civilization and chaos, the veneer between we're all in this together and every man and family for themselves.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah. And great literature, is a mirror. It gets you to reflect on your situation as much as what's happening to the characters.
Yeah, one moment that deals with parenting at the end of the world after all order has broken down, that really stuck with me is there's this moment when a stranger grabs a hold of the son, and the father has to make a decision. He has a gun, it only has 2 bullets in it,
yeah.
And he uses it in that moment to kill this bad guy. And afterwards, McCarthy writes, "This is my child," he said. "I wash a dead man's brains out of his hair. That is my job." Then he wrapped him in the blanket and carried him to the fire. Obviously, this is an extreme example of parenthood. A few of us have to do this, but at the same time, that metaphorically is what it sometimes means to be a parent, which is you have to do the tough things for your child. You have to do that over and over again.
I was struck by that scene too. And then what the stakes of that scene mean is that having lost one of the bullets, he now faces a day-to-day reality where his insurance policy, like, well, I could always kill him and myself before something horrible happens. Those 2 bullets in the gun are representative of that. And so to have to use that bullet there to save his son creates this profound tension in the rest of the book, which is every exchange, he's now having to think about his inability to save him and his son from potentially heinous, unlivable torture.
Yeah, after that, there are several bracing scenes in the book where he gives the child the pistol. And he's basically like, you know what to do. I have to go do this thing. Stay here. If someone comes, you have to put this gun in your mouth. And it's so, I'm not going to curse on this.
Yeah.
But it is terrible. But it also, on a deeper level, it gets this conversation that he has with his wife in these brief flashbacks. There are only a couple near the beginning of the book, which is, she says, this is a horror movie. We're the Walking Dead. Like, maybe it's better for us not to be here anymore. Maybe we should just end this now and not have to deal with the horror of whatever comes next. She eventually makes that decision for herself. And the man is constantly fighting against that despair and that idea that, yes, we could both easily take our lives tonight and that would be the end. And it would save us from all this suffering that we are experiencing. But as he says near the end of the book, the man is fading. He's dying. His son asks him, what's the bravest thing you ever did? And the man says, after he spits blood into the road, getting up this morning. And it is the idea that every day that I have gotten up after all this terrible stuff has happened, and every day that you get up, and every day that the two of us walk on this road together, we are doing the bravest thing that has ever been done.
I would say the one flaw of the book that I experienced rereading it now is the character of the wife. I remembered her as not having the stomach for the Walking Dead horror show that was their lives. I guess I didn't pick up on the earlier reads. I took it to mean that she basically rejects the child from birth, that she doesn't want to hold it right after it's born, that there's something about who she is or what she's going through that makes her not want to have anything to do with the kid. It felt very one-dimensional. I felt like she could have been more well-rounded. And her as a plot device, which is that she was there and then wasn't there, could have been rendered in a way that doesn't make her fundamentally unmaternal and the father sort of a superhero. So that did ring less realistic or meaningful to me in this other reading. I don't know what you thought.
I agree. And I think it's a critique that has followed McCarthy his entire career, or as long as people were paying attention to his career. You know, you can't write female characters. You're not very good at representing. At the same time, however, one of the things that he does do well, I think, is hit over and over again in this book the ways in which the decisions that a parent has to make, as you said, sort of resonate, whether you're walking your kid to school, cleaning them up after they fall off the jungle gym, or you're in a post-apocalypse. I mean, you I know, think this is a particularly interesting book in the context of thinking about parenting.
Yeah, I like to call it a parenting book in disguise. Like, I think a lot of men especially maybe aren't going to sit down and read a parenting book, but there's a lot of parenting lessons in here. Just even your point about like the bravest thing you can do is just get up and keep going. There's a part in the book where he's talks about just trying to tell his kid stories, like stories of virtue and just things to instill him with hope and values. Obviously, you know, this connects back to the idea of carrying the fire. I think that's a really important part about being a parent, and something that's fundamentally missing in both a lot of children's literature these days and in adult literature. Like, where are the heroic figures? Like, if anything, the literature is like about parents making the selfish choice. You know, I just reread Revolutionary Road. You have the sort of struggle with the obligations and the unfairness and the dysfunctions of parenting in modern society, but not a lot that sort of gives you a sense of like being part of this kind of sacred, like that your kid is this warrant, and that warrant has a kind of holiness or sacredness to it.
Ryan, I feel like you're leading right into something I wanted to ask a bunch about, which is not only about your relationship to this book as a parent, but your relationship to this book as someone who practices and encourages others to consider practicing the philosophy of Stoicism, which is focused on, there are a bunch of tenets, a bunch of virtues. I feel like a bunch of that stuff is in here, whether Cormac McCarthy intended it or not. And I'm wondering, as someone who thinks about that all the time and has thought about that for years and has written several books about it, how you see those two things coming together in this work.
Yeah, I think there's a lowercase stoicism to the road, and then at different times, some uppercase stoicism as far as the virtues and the values. There's the sort of toughness and the resiliency and the bravest thing I did was get up this morning. But there's also the idea of like, hey, look, we don't eat people. I know that seems like a pretty low bar, but like the rest of the world has descended into barbarism, but we have chosen not to. The rest of the world might steal. The rest of the world might hurt, might use people for its own survival, but we're not going to do that. And we're not going to do that because we're the good guys, as the child so earnestly says. And you can see this kind of interplay between the father and the son, where it's like every time the father has to make a vexing moral choice, or has to protect them, or they have to, do something that in a civilized society would be wrong, like raiding someone else's house. The child goes, but we're still the good guys, right? How are we the good guys? Mm-hmm. And again, I feel like that our primary job as parents is obviously to keep our kids literally safe and alive. And then the next most urgent thing is raising them to be one of the good guys.
There's a moment near the end, the man is not doing so well. And he says, every day is a lie, but you are dying. That is not a lie. And I know you like to say memento mori.
Right there.
I took my child once to the Cloisters, which is a branch of the Metropolitan Museum of Art that is in Upper Manhattan, and they have a bunch of medieval art there. And there's a mirror, and etched on the mirror is essentially, remember you will die.
Yeah. My
child was probably 10, 9 when I showed this to him. Maybe not the best parenting decision. I was like, this is something you should remember. Then I tried to explain it to him, and I failed, and that's part of parenting too. But yeah, memento mori.
Yeah, that we are mortal. We don't get to decide when we go, how we go. There's a passage in Meditations where Marcus Aurelius is quoting Epictetus, that I think pertains here to the road, where he talks about as you tuck your child in at night, he says you should say to yourself, they might not make it till the morning. And when he does this philosophical practice, I do not think he is detaching in advance. I think he's reminding himself that tomorrow is not for certain, that every day is a lie, no day is certain. We are all dying every day, the Stoics would say. And so to take moments for granted, to take people for granted, to put things off is arrogant and reckless, I think.
Can I quote something else from the book? It's hitting right on what you're saying. There's a moment where McCarthy writes, people were always getting ready for tomorrow. I didn't believe in that. Tomorrow wasn't getting ready for them. It didn't even know they were there.
Yeah. There is something about, we're always rejecting this kind of present moment, either in anxiety of the future, like what if this terrible thing could happen, or we're neglecting the present because we're just assuming the future will be better. And you do this as a parent a lot, I can't wait till they walk. I can't wait till they go off to school. I can't wait till they drive. I can't wait. And then inevitably you will get to that benchmark and wish to be back where you are right now. And so how long do you get to do this? How long do any of us have? Does the world have? I think these are some of the haunting themes there of the book for sure.
When we come back, Ryan Holiday explains why The Road was the only novel he selected for his list of the 10 best books of the 21st century. The Road was the only novel you picked when we asked you to pick 10 books from the 21st century. You picked 9 nonfiction books and The Road. And I just want to hear a little bit more about that.
That's funny. I don't remember all of the books on the list. I do tend to find that most modern fiction is disappointing. And I think what I was struck by, rereading The Road is how much it felt like a book not published in this time. Mm-hmm. Like if you told me the publication date was 1971 or 1941, I'd probably buy most of it. Certainly there's not much in the way of technology that dates the book one way or another, but it does have the feel of a novel that's been with us a lot longer than 20 years. I sometimes talk about I don't believe that Free Fallin' by Tom Petty was written in 1989. It's much older than that. And The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down is obviously a song from the Civil War, right? It could not have been written as recently as it was. And very rarely do I have the experience where I read something new and I feel like this has been around forever. And that's the feeling that I get reading The Road.
It's a great feeling. I would like to close out by asking you if you had some thematic recommendations.
I got them.
Okay, so first, Father's Day is here. Give me a couple books that you think people should buy, the dads in their life.
I thought some parenting books generally that I thought people would love if you were struck by The Road as a kind of a parenting book. Of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves, about the sort of male crisis, why young men are struggling. There is something about sort of traditional masculinity that Cormac McCarthy embraces, I think, in most of his books, that I do think is positive in the sense that it can inspire men to be the best of themselves. So I thought that book was relevant. We were talking about the sort of practical independence, craftiness, survivability skills. Steve Rinella, he wrote a parenting book called Outdoor Kids in an Inside World that I've been raving about. And one of my favorite lines in the book, he says, you want to raise kids that don't say ew a lot. You want kids who'd be able to survive the world if something fell apart. On a little more literary front, I think more people should read this. This is Kafka's Letter to the Father, which is this confessional, heartbreaking, tragic letter that Kafka writes to his father, who he was never really a fit with, never really got him, and his father never really got his son. There's something very beautiful and vulnerable about this book. I've always loved that. I've said that just as The Road is a parenting book in disguise, I think David Epstein's Range is a parenting book in disguise. It's about athletes primarily being generalists or specialists, and it contrasts Roger Federer and Tiger Woods.
Oh, wow. But
you can't talk about Tiger Woods and not think of it and that specialization from the lens of choices that his parents made very early. And I don't know. I talk about this book a lot with sports parents, but any parent who's trying to figure out, especially in this world of AI, do you try to get them really good at one thing, or is actually that the ultimate vulnerability in a world of disruption and change? And then we were talking about keeping the fire and being the good guys. Dr. Becky's Good Inside is a book I've given to a lot of dads and parents across the board. Her point is just remembering, your kid is good inside. They were born good. They are good. They are trying their best. They are not trying to hurt you or drive you insane or kill you or all the things it can sometimes feel like. And when you start from this premise, it makes some of the things that we do and say and think about as a parent, so obviously counterproductive. So I thought this was a really sweet and wonderful, wonderful book that I really love.
I haven't read any of those. Those are all great recommendations. I'm going to take them with me.
Okay.
Again, you recommend books all the time. You own a bookstore. Imagine a person comes into the painted porch, says, I just finished The Road, knock my socks off. What should I read that's sort of like The Road, or what should I read next?
Okay, so The Road was an Oprah book club pick, and it was popular when it came out. Reese Witherspoon's book club picked Wild Dark Shores about a year ago. And this is a book about a family in the midst of a world being destroyed by climate change that is keeping seeds in a seed library on an island off the coast of Antarctica. The walls of it are caving in. The world is basically ending, all slightly less apocalyptically and violently as The Road. And then all of a sudden, a woman washes up on shore alive. Mystery ensues, but a book that reminded me of The Road in that it's got some parenting lessons. It's a single father on the island again. So similar thing. Have you read Death Be Not Proud by John Gunther? Oh, okay. Will also make you break down and weep. John Gunther, one of the most famous journalists in America in the middle of the 20th century. His son, this precocious, brilliant kid on his way to Harvard at like 16 or 17, gets diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. And it is a book about his son fighting for his life. That same fire that you see in the sun and in the road, you see in this kid, and you see him trying to keep it alive. His parents keep it alive. It is a beautiful, beautiful book. I was very moved by that. And then if you like the survivalist elements of The Road, the sort of journey element of it, and the implacable sort of human spirit, the inability to quit or be killed, I thought The Revenant, which is also a good movie, is a very good one, based on a true story about a man mauled by a grizzly bear, left to die by his two companions. And he undertakes a several 100-mile journey of survival so he can enact his revenge on them. It is a riveting novel.
And he comes out looking like Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes, exactly.
The most impressive feat that has ever been accomplished.
Yes.
Ryan Holiday, thank you so much for joining the book review to talk about Cormac McCarthy's The Road, one of the New York Times' 100 best books of the 21st century. It was such a good conversation.
Oh, man, I had so much fun.
I hope one day to visit your store. I really do.
I'll see you out here. Come out anytime.
All right. Have a great weekend.
All right, bye.
The book review is produced by Sarah Diamond, Amy Pearl, and Patricia Zulbaran. It's edited by Tracy Mumford and mixed this week by Efim Shapiro. Original music by Dan Powell and Elishaba Etup. Special thanks to Dahlia Haddad. We want to hear what you think about the show, so send us an email at thebookreview@nytimes.com. I'm Gilbert Cruz. Thanks for listening.